should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time!
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah!
I finished these fights.
Give me a hell yeah!
Top Rope Nation.
Learn to love it. It's the best thing going today.
You know, guys, it seems like every week before we go on the air, there's some kind of major news breaking either that day or the day before. And man, oh man, do we have some stuff to talk about tonight on episode 97 of Top Rope Nation. Thanks for joining us. My name is Ryan Drosty of comicbook.com, joined as always by Kyle Ross and Justin Joint, here to break down all the latest, including Lars Sullivan's being a gigantic piece of trash. They call him Lars Sullivan. The AEW television deal that is about to be made official next week. We're going to lead off with that one here in just a second. WWE television, which has been lacking inspiration in recent weeks, and we got to get some thoughts in on this week's Dark Side of the Ring Viceland documentary. So let me throw it out. Kyle Ross, how is your week going this week? Thank you for joining us, as always, Kyle.
That was one of your better show intros, if I don't say so myself.
That was probably my least prepared one, too.
Well, what did we learn? Something else I learned, by the way, today is by the time this podcast drops, there is a 36.5% chance that Big E Langston will have slept with Becky Lynch's mom.
Don't you
dare! Man, he's made Becky Lynch's mom his like header photo on Twitter, I think I saw.
Okay, by the way, that stuff's been very funny, but equally as funny for me, I thought, was, did you see like JR jump in?
No,
on this? Jim Ross, who's like, oh yeah, I can see the resemblance. Your mom's not bad looking, and
oh no,
it gets worse. It gets worse. It gets worse before it gets better. And then he hits Becky with a, my God, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree.
Oh, that's bad.
Becky fires back with easy, Tiger. I was in tears at that one.
Oh, that's bad.
Like I was like, it's so great that like Becky was able to like have fun with like, you know, the thought of like Big E having sex with her mom, but like JR just makes like a comment, and it's he gets the stiff arm.
Speaking of Becky Lynch and the Irish, a fun-loving Irish man that I know, Mr. Justin Joint across town. Justin, how's it going this week?
Glory, glory, Tottenham Hotspurs. Going to the Champions League final, baby.
I knew you would be in a good mood over that.
Yeah, even though my Celtics shit the bed for the fourth straight game yesterday. It was a very up and down sports day for me yesterday.
Yeah,
but the highs far out-peaked the lows.
I was gonna say, when you got that kind of a high, that kind of overshadows everything.
Yeah, it was a good day.
So, is Kyrie leaving? Is Kyrie gonna leave? What do you think?
I will happily drive him to the airport. I am so freaking over that guy. I don't want to give him a huge contract and have him around anymore, unless the only way is if we've somehow got Durant or Davis. Mm-hmm. And that's only because the one thing he has shown this year is that he is not a number one guy. He is a number two guy. So unless we can get a number one guy, I will show Kyrie the door. Fuck that guy.
I think Kyle would probably agree with pretty much everything you said there about his former Cleveland Cavalier.
You know, it's funny, LeBron and Kyrie, all this talk about, what it would be like to play together. And I just sit there and think, man, it's crazy if they ever had the chance to play together with one another. That'd be crazy if that would ever happen. Oh, wait, it did. It is, once again, the moral of the story for the several of you that came here for NBA talk. Once again,
I like changing it up here and there.
Yeah, no, for sure. But the life lesson, once again, is that Cavs owner Dan Gilbert is 173.5% cow dung. Just hideous.
He's about as bad as the second half of Game of Thrones on Sunday.
Oh,
I like Game of Thrones.
I thought it was a good episode.
Yeah, I didn't like the big one 2 weeks ago. I liked the one.
Okay. My only problem was the Cersei and Danny meet up at the end. I thought that was dumb.
Okay. Yeah, because a lot of it wasn't very logical.
I mean, Cersei should have just killed them all right there. There's no reason for her not to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Game of Thrones spoilers.
Sorry if you haven't watched it yet, but if you haven't watched it yet, there's like no way it has been spoiled. That honestly is not that big of a spoiler, I guess.
Who gets more fired up? Game of Thrones spoiler guy or wrestling spoiler guy?
Oh, wrestling spoiler guy for sure. I mean, whenever we're live tweeting a pay-per-view or something, we always get some random ass guy jumping in there like, "Oh, I'm trying to watch this. Warn us with the spoilers." It's like, why are you on social media then?
Yes, that's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah, if you don't want to be spoiled, you probably should stay off social media.
Or the bigger example is over on Comic Book when we post articles with Raw results or pay-per-view results. There's always people in the comments like, "Why does your headline have who won the match in it?" It's like, why are you on Facebook? What are you thinking?
Want to know something, spoiler guy? Sometimes I actually read the results and then watch the program. Gives you, in my opinion, when you know, gets you that better evaluation process. You know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's NXT TV pretty much all the time. So
yeah.
Believe it or not, guys, there was a time when Raw was taped.
Yeah,
and we knew what was happening. And SmackDown was taped every week. So
yeah, remember when Mick Foley won the title on a taped Raw and that sucked? Oh,
yeah, there you go. Everyone tuned in, anyways. Guys, before we go any further, we got to read. I'm going to read off a review because we got a new review this week. I'm pull that up on my phone as I'm talking. I'm going to multitask here. But if you are listening on iTunes, hit the subscribe button. If you're on iTunes or Apple Media, whatever, the podcast app on your iPhone, scroll down to the bottom of our show page, hit the 5-star review. Helps us out a lot. Lets us, kind of rank a little bit higher when people are searching for the wrestling podcast and we get in front of more eyes. We greatly appreciate that. If you're listening on Stitcher Radio, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, wherever podcasts are found, subscribe. You'll hear us each and every week. Never miss an episode. This week, we had a new review come in on Friday night. And so if you leave an actual text review, we'll read it on the air. So this is from iTunes. This is from Ninhead, who left us a 5-star review. It says, the heading is "A Triumph. Never before has a show woven Ace Ventura references so seamlessly into the tapestry of a thinking man's wrestling podcast. This podcast will save your life." Thank you very much, Ninhead. Fantastic review. That's right up there in the upper tier of all reviews ever left for this podcast.
Nin, is it N-I-N? I wonder if that's 9 Inch Nails.
Yeah, probably. The I and the second N are not capitalized, but Ninhead.
I could be wrong then. Never mind.
I think that makes sense though.
I could pretty hate machine.
Well, hey, whoever you are, we really appreciate you taking the time to leave us a review. Thanks a lot. And hey, if you really support the show and you want to join us each and every week as we record live, there is an exclusive video stream of us going on right now over on our Patreon page, patreon.com/Top Rope Nation for $1 a month, one measly $1 a month. You can join us every week as we record live. You can be a fly on the wall, hear all of our stream of consciousness as we record. You get the unedited show before the general public, because usually when I go back and I listen to the recording, sometimes I have to cut out a few things. You'll get it all. You'll get that exclusive video stream, and the general public does not get that. All for $1 a month. $5 a month gets you exclusive shows. It gets you access to our show notes each and every week, which I'm scrolling through right now on my iPad as we record. So if you want to see what our format sheet looks like every single week, head on over to Patreon. I appreciate your support. So the biggest story going on right now, because this just broke today as we record on Thursday, it's kind of been the rumor for a while, but looks like all Elite Wrestling will be on the Turner networks, and the report says TNT starting in the fall. We don't have a exact date yet, but Turner is presenting their upfronts for advertisers next Wednesday. I think it's at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah. Real kick in the ass to Vince.
Yeah, there you go. So the biggest competition he's had since WCW went out of business as far as like the financial backing of another wrestling company, AEW. I guess they're set to present this and announce it next Wednesday around 10 o'clock in the morning. I guess that would be Eastern time. And TNT. So that's interesting because with the NBA, we've talked about this before. The NBA on Tuesday and Thursday Not sure how they're going to do. I mean, is Wednesday night the night they're going to present it? Because SmackDown is moving to Friday. I don't think they're going to go head to head with Raw. So, I mean, you guys have any thoughts on what day this might be, Kyle?
Well, if it's on TNT, I mean, the playoff wise, it's a lot different now than it was in Nitro's heyday. I mean, Nitro would get preempted. I was just listening. Ironically enough, the guys over between the sheets were doing redoing a whatever the week that was for this is for 97, and Nitro was preempted to 1 hour this week because of the basketball playoffs. But what's interesting is back then they didn't have playoff games on every night. I don't think over 20 years ago, did they? That's more of a recent thing where every playoff game is always on TV. I feel so this time of year, you guys know, I mean, we just, spent a couple minutes in the opening talking about the NBA. There's basketball on every night. Now, it's not always on TNT. Some nights it's on ESPN. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. I don't know if there is a concrete way to navigate the NBA playoff schedule for them. But, they'll take just getting on, I think. I don't think the NBA playoffs are their biggest concern right now.
Yeah. Justin, what is your anticipation level for the launch of AEW? I mean, sometimes we like to joke around about the non-WWE company. We all want to see another company succeed. And I mean, so I've heard some criticism of our show that we're too positive on WWE sometimes. But I think we're negative. I think we're negative on WWE when they deserve it. And I think we're going to be pretty negative on them tonight. Who wouldn't want another viable wrestling company? So, I mean, Justin, what's your anticipation level?
Well, being that I'm currently on strike for watching WWE on Mondays and Tuesdays, I am stoked for AEW. In fact, I hope when they announce from MSG, it's that the show is going to be on Mondays opposite Raw, and the show is going to be called Well Done. I'm excited because it's something new for us wrestling fans, and more than anything, hopefully it lights a fire under WWE's ass to get them writing some good television or something to more than what they're doing right now.
I did not know you were on a WWE strike.
Yeah, it started last week.
Okay.
Until I start hearing good things or interesting things, I'm out.
Well, that's why we have
an interesting podcast.
Well, that's why we have the Kyle Ross I Love This Sport match of the week, where we can talk classic wrestling coming up later in this very broadcast. We'll talk about last week's recommendation too. But hey, WWE Network, it always comes in handy if you want to not watch the current product, I guess. But
the award-winning WWE Network, by the way.
Yeah, that's what I've been going to.
Yeah, we should point out that according to the report from therap.com, that is WRAP, financial details are not expected to be released here. So we don't know what they're being paid, we presume they're AEW's getting money, but we're not going to know details because they don't have to. They're not a publicly traded company like WWE.
Yeah. Well, I would say I'm ready for this because it's just been so lackluster in recent weeks with WWE, pretty much since WrestleMania. There's not much to look forward to. The shows just feel like they're just out there and nothing really important's happening. And it's hard to get motivated to watch the shows. And I think the ratings reflect that. So yeah, I think the business in general just needs some excitement injected into it. And this is definitely going to bring that. Now, we're not going to have their weekly show until the fall, but their first show ever, Double or Nothing's coming up here in a few weeks. And that's another interesting point because we don't even know where we're going to be able to watch that at. They haven't announced any broadcasting information. So that makes you wonder if that's going to be tied in with the television announcement.
I would assume it's going to be. I mean, you can't wait too much longer.
I mean, there's no chance that TNT would broadcast this now, is there? And then start the weekly show later on. You would think they would want to monetize it with pay-per-view.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance, but I don't think that's going to happen.
I mean, I suppose that'd be a way to get some excitement behind it, but then what do you say? And then their weekly show starts in 5 months.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of an issue, but I mean, I'm definitely going to watch Double or Nothing live. I'm looking forward to it, but yeah, I have no idea how I'm going to be watching it. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Any closing comments on that situation, guys, before we move on?
No, not really. You hit it. I mean, if even if like you don't really care that much about AEW, this is a great thing in the sense that it's just more big time jobs in the industry for the performers. That's a good thing. And two, kind of like Justin was alluding to, the lighting the proverbial fire under Vince's ass. You would hope that this would cause him, depending what AEW does and what their television show looks like, him to reevaluate his own product, because as we're about to get into in a little bit, their TV does need a drastic overhaul. They meaning WWE.
I think by default, it's already going to be the most exciting wrestling program on TV the minute it debuts, just because by default, everything's going to be fresh. Everything they present is going to be fresh because it's a brand new company. So at least for a little while, it's going to have the newness factor to it. And
you have to do something. You know?
But for a little while, they'll just by default have this excitement behind it because it's brand new. But yeah, that will wear off eventually, and they'll have to have something new and a reason to get you to tune in each and every week. But I think with AEW, there's nothing to dislike about them so far. I mean, they've been like their guys have been accessible. Tony Khan does the interview with Chris Van Vliet, on YouTube, which was an awesome watch. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. We know that like Cody and the Bucks and Omega, they are very fan friendly. The organization has been very fan friendly. What they're doing for the business, as far as supposedly the benefits they're providing their workers with health insurance, the fact that they're going to have a lighter touring schedule for the benefit of their wrestlers' health. All these things are like advancements for the wrestling industry. And so there's really nothing to dislike at this point. I think it's been mostly positive.
I mean, really, the whole key is, look, we know that they can cater and entertain a certain percentage of people, right? Like the wrestling hardcores. There is a built-in audience that already exists for this, that likes the product and is going to like the product, and they know how to please those people. Okay? Just doing that isn't enough, though. They've got to grow the business. I mean, that's the whole key. You've got to bring in other people, whether it be lapsed fans, whether siphoning away the WWE audience, or new fans altogether. You got to do that. I mean, you just can't. I mean, while it's impressive what they've been able to do with no television, it's obviously, this seems, very obvious. You've got to grow the business.
Mm-hmm.
Just catering to your existing fan base is not enough.
Yeah. I think their advertising for the television program on Turner should have like kind of at least some of the campaigns should have kind of a nostalgic flair to them, because so many wrestling fans that grew up at the time that we did in the 80s and 90s associate pro wrestling with TBS and TNT. And it's such a cool thing to even think about wrestling being on those channels again. Like I never thought we'd see wrestling on those networks. I've thought about it many times over the years, and just the nostalgic feel of seeing pro wrestling on the Turner networks again is so cool. Then there's so many lapsed fans out there that tuned out the minute WCW went out of business. I think they should take out ads with some kind of flair about, wrestling returns to TNT, and somehow try to draw in those lapsed fans with an ad campaign about just the fact that it's pro wrestling on TNT again. That's going to get people interested, I think, because it'll make them think about the 90s.
Yeah. I mean, well, and even before the 90s. I mean, Meltzer's written about this extensively, and it's something that I think non-wrestling fans don't understand at all, is that there was this huge portion of the wrestling fan base that once WCW shut its doors, and even before that, as they were going downhill, just stopped watching wrestling. They did not gravitate towards the WWE product. They grew up not really liking the WWE product. They liked WCW, going all the way back to the Crockett days. That was the kind of wrestling they liked. And, they didn't want to like the WWE, and they didn't like the direction it was going, believe it or not, in the Attitude Era. As much as the Attitude Era is put on such a pedestal, there, were people who still wanted WCW to win that war. And once WCW closed its doors, the wrestling audience shrunk, and it, has continued to shrink, quite frankly, despite the fact that the audience left right now there is willing to pay a lot of more dollars than fans have ever been willing to pay before.
Well, I just hope that they bring back like numerous vacated titles. That's all I want. More championships need to be vacated.
Wasn't there some rumors about them bringing back some WCW show names? Because I would have assumed WWE had trademarked all those. But
I think they did go after WWE. By the way, that Justin comment was a reference to a text that we had about when we were talking about the last few years of WCW and the ridiculous amounts of vacated titles. But no, I think WWE late in the fall did actually trademark a bunch of stuff. Didn't they trademark Halloween Havoc and stuff?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Justin, by the way, that YouTube video you referenced in our text thread with all the WCW title changes, like 91 on or whatever it is, that's popped up in my recommended feed on YouTube so many times.
Dude,
like
you gotta watch it.
The minute you said that, I was like, oh my God, how many times have I seen that in my YouTube feed? And I haven't watched it yet, but I knew exactly what you were talking about.
For everybody at home, I was letting these guys know in our text thread that in the span of 2 years, the top 2 titles in WCW were vacated a total of 15 times.
And Shawn Michaels didn't even work for the company.
Nobody lost their smile in 2 years. It's crazy.
Yeah, that is nuts. By the way, if you're over at YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube. All of our podcasts are there as well. I forgot to mention that a little bit ago. YouTube.com/Top Rope Nation. There's also some exclusive content there that you won't find on our podcast feeds, as well as once in a while, we'll do some live video casts that go out to the world that aren't Patreon exclusive. We did one after WrestleMania, so you can check that out as well. But I was thinking a second ago, and this is going to be a good segue, when you were mentioning that even in the Attitude Era, Kyle, there were some fans that just didn't want to switch over to WWE because that wasn't the kind of wrestling they liked. It was, I mean, I even had friends as a teenager in the late 90s when you think everyone would be watching the Attitude Era, WWF, because it was so risque and everything. I had friends, believe it or not, there were huge holdouts on it saying, no, WWF is just too trashy. I don't want to watch. It's too trashy. Look what they're doing.
They preferred wrestlers with the name of General Erection.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, now hold on. That was like Russo killed that audience because Russo basically just slapped a WWE coat of paint on WCW, which was the completely wrong move. Mm-hmm. That was, I mean, that was a huge misread of what that fan base wanted. But guys who were a couple of years older than me. I remember in college, I want to say I was a freshman or sophomore. I hung out a couple times over these guys, these upperclassmen's place. They would order the WCW pay-per-views. I remember I watched Halloween Havoc 98 over there, which what a disaster that was. But in more ways than one, but that's a different podcast for a different day. But, I mean, there were. I mean, that narrative has kind of been written out, but it's true.
Yeah. Well, the reason I said that would be a good segue, trashy product, is because we're about to talk about trashy Lars Sullivan on this broadcast and everything. Well, it actually came out a couple months ago, but it had some new steam behind it this week with this story with Lars Sullivan and the comprehensive list of all of his racist, sexist, homophobic comments that he has posted in the past before he was in WWE on the bodybuilding.com message board is where most of this originates. And if you haven't seen it on Reddit, the Squared Circle subreddit, there is an entire thread where someone has just made a comprehensive list of all of his horrible, horrible takes that he has had over the years. Screenshots. I should say allegedly Lars Sullivan, but the user that is behind all these posts at one point did post a picture, and it's clearly the guy who is Lars Sullivan right now in the WWE. But that's our confirmation. It's him. And
Big E all but confirmed it himself. We were joking about Big E, who, by the way, has been very active. I don't know if they gave him the good drugs or what in the hospital, but he has been very active on social media, even tweeting at David Bixenspan, which I'm sure made Corey Graves very happy. But somebody tweeted, "Hey, Big, are you aware of this Lars Sullivan thing?" And Big E said, "Oh, people are aware." And if it's true, he kind of was like, he's gonna, have to kind of come to grips that he said that, and he works in a company full of minorities.
Yep.
It's the easy. Obviously, you should not have those opinions.
Hot take.
Hot take. We're bringing up. We're throwing high heat here on Top Rope Nation. But if you do, Jesus Christ, why would you write that online?
Yeah.
It amazes me. I don't know. I mean, here's, I guess, you know, we talk about old people being old and drifting away. Well, let's kind of put our old men hats on here, the three of us. Okay. Do the two of you ever just look at some things that people put on, whether you like it or don't like it, or no matter what it's about? It doesn't have to be like, you know, racist, homophobic stuff. Just, are you guys constantly stunned by the things people put online?
Like dick pics?
That's, for instance, one of them, you know? I mean, like, you know, just like, I'm just continuously astounded. I mean, I've probably made a few dumb tweets. I mean, late in the night, you know, I came home, Skip Bayless maybe made some anti-LeBron remarks, and I probably wrote something that I shouldn't have. Okay, but,
I know you've been blocked by a few Twitter users, Kyle Rouse.
Yeah, Clay Travis. He doesn't like me, but that's okay. I don't like Clay Travis. What do you got to say about that? But you know, it stuns me. Like, what is this idiot thinking?
Yeah.
I mean, in more ways than one.
I completely and utterly disagree with everything that, you know, he posted online. I think that shit's disgusting. But just as far as posting stupid shit online, I think that's something I would have done in, you know, my late teens, early 20s. But luckily for me, the internet really wasn't all that, you know, it was around, but not to the extent it is today. And luckily, you know, by the time I would have done that kind of stuff, you know, I was old enough to know better.
That's a great point by Justin Joyce, who I love with all my heart and soul. You're right. Like when I was a real immature jackass as opposed to now, and I'm just an immature jackass. You know, Twitter didn't exist. Social media didn't exist.
You guys would not have said stuff like this, though.
No, not like this.
Yeah.
No. But I mean, like, I would have, like, you know, I don't know what I would have written.
Let's be clear, though. He wasn't just a teenager. Like, some of these posts came when he was like 23, 24 years old.
Yeah.
So, okay, my question is, like, and I think this is freaking disgusting, but the last I heard is that the WWE is just kind of hoping that this goes away. Obviously, yes. I don't think they have any intentions of letting him go. And if that's the case, like, why the hell did they fire Seth Rollins' ex-girlfriend?
I got another one on this.
She got busted with like Nazi propaganda or paraphernalia or something along that lines. And
yeah, she had like a Nazi flag in the back.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. You're not talking about Becky Lynch.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's current.
This is
current Bay.
Yeah. This was a couple years ago. I got another hot take on this. So here's a real hot take.
I know where you're going with it already.
Yeah, you probably do. How in the hell did they fire in like the same day it came out the biggest star arguably of all time? I mean, I'm not trying to defend Hulk Hogan. What he said was awful, really terrible, racist comments. But this is the biggest star, him and Steve Austin, The Rock, of all time in the WWE. And they fired him over those couple comments he made on the sex tape. And this guy, who's not even a star, they're just going to let it go. Like, this is way beyond. This is way beyond anything Hulk Hogan said.
Because Hulk Hogan was picked up by the mainstream media. This is on a Reddit forum. That's the difference.
But the whole wrestling audience is going to be knowing about this.
I hope this spreads like wildfire.
I mean, it's on like big websites now, like Paste Magazine covered it. I saw that was one of them.
Has Comic Book?
Yes, Comic Books covered it. So like it's spreading. Everything spreads on the internet. But like, yeah, I understand what you mean with Hulk Hogan as a national story and stuff. But like, would you guys agree? Both of them are horrible circumstances. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. This is way beyond anything Hulk Hogan said. Way beyond.
This is not worse than what got Bill Watts fired from WCW. I mean, he defended not serving African Americans at a restaurant. Like,
well, and if Lars Sullivan starts pissing out of like a second story window or whatever that was, then
yeah, that too. Yeah, but I mean, this is really bad. I mean, for 2019, I mean, it's bad in any year, but I mean, in 2019 eyes, it's really grotesque. It'll be interesting to see moving forward with Lars, because remember, you know, this is maybe a second strike on him. You know, he had the alleged mental health bout earlier in the year when he was going to be brought up. And for the record, I root for anyone in that situation. You know, I mean, anyone with mental, I mean, that's someone I thoroughly lose support. But like, it probably didn't earn him, because this is wrestling, it probably didn't earn him any favors in the locker room. This certainly isn't. Yeah. If, Big E say people are aware of it. I mean, and we've talked about it before. The togetherness of that locker room is a really big deal right now. And if you're somebody who's ostracized from the locker room, it's probably pretty easy to get let go.
Yeah. That's ironic you mentioned that, because I believe there's a post where he's making fun of people with mental illness as well. So
there you go.
He ran the gauntlet here. I mean, he made fun of and posted awful things about practically anyone you can think of. And a lot of it's way off base. But, we got some pretty bad takes. I mean, most of the people on our Twitter account were, when we were commenting on this, right there with us. We got some bad takes coming along about, he was young, so what? And I think our guy, Joe Dorian, had a good comment on that. Like, yeah, guys, he was young. They don't teach don't be a racist until you're a junior in high school.
I like that comment from Joe Dorian.
That was really good.
A good personal friend of mine says the last dump he took is more important to him than Israel. What's sad about that is that's probably not even one of the 10 worst things in this list.
Yeah, I'm scrolling through them right now. Like, what do I want to actually read on the air? It's bad.
The quote unquote gray area of rape.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
What's it going to take for them to actually fire him? Like, I mean, I guess you already kind of said is it has to hit more of a mainstream media, but I'm also curious. Like, I mean, you think they're going to keep him off TV for a while, hoping it blows over? Or, I mean, they certainly can't have him come out in SmackDown next week and beat up R-Truth.
I hate to say this, but I feel like they'll send him out because they know he's going to get booed, and they'll mistake that as good heat when it's not good heat. They won't care. It's so bad. And I think it might have been one of the same people that was defending him in our Twitter replies.
Did this break on Tuesday or no? Or was it Wednesday?
So this has been floating out there for a couple of months. Yeah, but then it came back.
But when was it because, before you had texted me about this, I had seen someone else retweet it. And was that Tuesday morning or Wednesday morning? Because it was Tuesday morning, we got the answer to Justin's question.
The thread on Reddit, I'm pulling it up right now, was posted. Let's see.
I would say more importantly is, when did Big E address it?
Mm-hmm. Big E's been, I'll look it up. Big E has been tweeting it out.
Yeah, it was Tuesday. So
okay, there you go.
Yeah, some of the people that were defending him that I saw online were saying stuff like, oh, he deserves a second chance and stuff. Okay, here's where I'm at with that. I'm all for second chances, and I think even criminals in jail should have a chance to be rehabilitated, depending on what the crime is. But that doesn't mean you get to work for one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world and make six figures. All right. Yes. So yes, he should be able to get a job. I have no problem with this guy working at the lumberyard or working construction or working at the Home Depot or something.
Yeah, we're not saying he should be tarred and feathered or to get the death penalty, for God's sake.
No, but you know what? To work in one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world, like the WWE, and make that kind of money and make a fortune, make way more money than any of us are ever going to make or ever even sniff. That's a huge privilege. And you know what? When you're this kind of a despicable human being, you kind of lose that privilege. That's where I'm at with it. So no, I do think they should cut the cord with them. I don't see it happening based on what I'm reading right now, but it's really disgusting. I'm just completely disgusted with the whole thing. So anyone else have anything?
Yeah, well, what's sad is it's not like he's the only person in America with this beliefs. I mean, unfortunately,
no, there's a lot of dumb Americans, unfortunately.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this behavior and some of this talk has been normalized in the last 3 years.
That's for sure.
You do the math, listener.
Yep.
I blame Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell is the worst. I agree. Yes. Kyle, maybe you should move to Kentucky and run for the U.S. Senate. I'd vote for you.
Well, believe you. I'm not living in Kentucky.
All right, let's move on.
I'm just fine on 71 North, the north part of I-71 here.
All right. So, Kyle, you wrote in the show notes, all caps, it's discussion time.
I wanted to
WWE
excite you
wildcard
guys.
the WWE wild card rule and what it tells us about the current product. What do we got to say about this? Kyle, this is your topic. You lead us
I have
off.
a lot to say. My God, I looked at my notes and Jesus Christ, how much time do we have here? Okay. So obviously anyone listening to this podcast knows what happened on WWE television this week. In a response to sagging ratings, Vince came out, instituted a wild card rule, which basically allows guys from SmackDown to appear on Raw and vice versa. This despite we are just weeks away, or weeks removed, I should say, from the Superstar Shakeup. Again, I am going to say the Superstar Shakeup, much better in theory than in practice. I think one thing I like about the show is we're able to reiterate some of our previous talking points, which I think illustrates that we have good talking points. The whole idea of just, we're going to shake it up this week is so inferior to the idea of making organic moves when the time calls for it throughout the year, rather than all these moves at once. Oh, it's going to be 3 guys this week and on this show, and then 3 guys, the next night will be moving. Instead of just moving one guy at a random time when it makes sense. We've been harping on that forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so we already knew that because we would talk about that, but something else we already knew. And what I want to get into, larger discussion here, is this wild card rule thing is the most WWE reaction possible. It is, you guys, I'm sure, have heard the old adage, bullet or a Band-Aid over a bullet hole.
Mm-hmm.
That's what this is. And it's a cover for there is no semblance whatsoever of long-term booking in this company. Yeah, there was a slight uptick in the ratings this week. Very slight, but I think that might have just been a natural bounce back. It wasn't way up.
No. Yeah.
And my fear is that they're going to then overdo this wild card business whenever ratings go down the next week, we're doing wild card, which is fine, I guess, in the moment, but it's not fixing the larger issue, which is the no semblance of long-term booking. Now, I'll say this. The individual matches that the wild card rule produced may have been the highlight of this week's TV, but it's not like the in-ring product is the biggest problem facing WWE. They may not produce as many quote-unquote high-end matches as New Japan Pro Wrestling, but they don't have to. New Japan has to produce that, a higher number of high-end matches to remain relevant. And, I'll go through them in a minute. I want to give you guys a chance to speak, but there were so many issues on Raw and SmackDown that I saw that this wild card rule is not going to address whatsoever.
Yeah, it's lazy, and it's not going to fix the storytelling problem, which is their real problem. I mean, and frankly, I don't need to see these guys on both shows every week. I know one of you disagree with this, but I like the brand split. This is the deepest roster they've ever had. They have enough guys that they should be able to put on 2 good shows a week. And it's just, like I said, it's just lazy to me.
Yeah, I feel like it's a diversion that prevents them from telling stories, because if you have people randomly jumping back and forth, you can't develop the long-term stories because they're not going to be there every week. So I wasn't a fan either. And also, this has been happening since before WrestleMania anyways. Like they've been having people jump back and forth to build WrestleMania matches. Like Becky's been back and forth constantly. I guess I would have to go along with Kyle in that I would kind of like to see the brand split end. I'm more of a traditionalist. I like one world champion. I like one tag team champion, and they do have a lot of depth, but they just have not developed those characters. And I don't really have any faith that they're going to build out the roster and develop them to a level where they can have 2 must-see shows. So I would like to see it go back to one brand with one world champion. And I feel like, you just look at their tag team division. They don't have the depth in the tag team division to have 2 tag team champions and have it be interesting. But if they had one title, and same thing with the women's title, you know, like I feel like that would be pretty dang deep, and it could be really interesting. So,
and you
yes,
could
you're
have,
gonna have to mix in new names here and there, though.
and
Go
you could
ahead,
have
Kyle.
actual feuds that aren't about titles. You know, I'm going to get in. You know, we talked about this last week, how formulaic the booking is. You know, it's just like, all right, you know, well, we need a title match on the show. How are we going to determine the contender? We have to find a way to determine it. And they do it in like, just like, you know, they have a match. I mean, I guess that's like pure sports. Like, okay, hey, here's 2 top contenders. One of them will win and get to challenge the title, I guess, but it doesn't make for the most compelling television.
Yeah, there's way too many titles. We run into that with these pay-per-views where it's hard to get people on the card if they're not in a title picture. Like, it's impossible, especially now that they've combined the pay-per-views too. You know, that combining the pay-per-views makes me think the brand split should be over too then.
I'm going to talk about something you guys both touched on in a few minutes. Because again, you know, I talk about the superstar shakeup works better in theory than in practice. And I'm going to make the case that that's the same thing with the brand split, because Justin, I think, made a good case for it in theory. But I think, Ryan, you laid out, we've seen this thing in practice, and it just, theory doesn't play out.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to get to the TV and some specifics this week, some things that just left me scratching my head personally, and whoever I think thinks that we're too positive on WWE, you know, maybe this will be your favorite part of Top Rope Nation ever. Okay. This promo from AJ Styles on SmackDown, where he kind of like, it was basically, he was sent out there to like fire up the crowd. Hey, it's AJ. But it was also, he was the voice very much of backstage trying to get over this wild card rule. And the crowd was not reacting to his explanation of the rules whatsoever, which shows it's convoluted and not really over. Now, it's 1 week, okay? But, you know, WWE people make this argument that they just want you to turn your brains off and have fun and enjoy the show, right? Well, do you know what we don't want if you for that is a bunch of rules. Like, I always remember like that Starrcade 89 tournament they did, the Iron Man rules. And I watched it, I don't know, like a year and a half ago. And like at the outset of that show, they have this like ridiculously long explanation of the point system. And to be honest, like, I'm like, all right, yeah, I know I'm going to be getting Flair, Muta, Sting, and Luger all wrestling each other. But I'm like, fuck this. There's too many rules. I don't want to like be like, oh, wait, okay, if he gets a count out, he goes ahead here. I don't want to do that. It's wrestling. I don't want to think that hard. Mm-hmm. So, you know, that's the people don't want to think this hard. And you could just like, it was so convoluted the way AJ was talking about it. More convoluted stuff. The Usos come out for the tag team title situation, right? Shane was going to give the titles to Bryan and Rowan. The Usos show up from Raw and say, hey, that's not the way to do it. You know, we're here to challenge. And then Shane, I didn't like this either. Shane's like, okay, he agreed to give him the shot, and then the Usos lost clean. That's not a good way to get over a babyface team. Just that's me personally. But the announcers during this were like, what if the Usos win the SmackDown tag titles? Do they go back to Raw with them? Are they then properties on SmackDown? You know, are they then property of SmackDown? You know, even though the Usos are very over, it was just like, you're making my head hurt with this stuff. And then who's making these decisions every week? Like, who gets to jump? Is it just like first come, first served? Did AJ Styles run to the building on SmackDown and say, I'm here first, I get to go out? Because if there's somebody who's allowing these guys to go in, it doesn't make a lot of sense that Miz would get in, because presumably Shane is making the decisions as the guy in charge of SmackDown, and Miz is the guy he's feuding with. Mm-hmm. So a lot of this shit can seem like nitpicking Nancy, but when you have all of it together, and this is the issue with WWE, when you have all of these nitpicks together, it becomes a problem.
Yeah. No, I think you're right on. I can't disagree. It makes you want to think too hard. You want to have fun watching pro wrestling. I was also thinking while you're talking too, when we're talking about how the shows are like a lot of you said, Kyle, it's formulaic and a lot of repetition. The fact that they have so many titles too, I wanted to get this out there, means that you're going to get the same match, you know, month after month at the pay-per-view, because, you know, if you have a guy defending a title constantly with a new defender or a new challenger every month, like, that's bad booking, because you want to have long-term feuds where there's a few matches in the series. But if you do that and it's only the title matches every pay-per-view, then you're getting the same matches every pay-per-view.
And we saw that last year with the AJ's title run. And by the way, another thing, AJ being a part of that wild card rule was so silly. He had just cut a promo the week before. I thought a good promo, for the record, where he talked about, SmackDown was the house that I built, but now I'm on Raw. And, this is the preeminent brand of WWE, and this is the title I wanted to win. So why did he go over and challenge for the SmackDown title? And then you have Sami Zayn, God bless him, I like the character, but the guy had been thrown in a dumpster the night before, and he's in a title match? I mean, he was getting good heat. I think the take a shower thing, actually, some people may roll their eyes on it, but it's heat. It's good heat. But again, it's a good match. People need to realize, I get so upset. I'm getting, that fires in my eyes, Justin. I think you could see it.
Dracarius.
Yes. It's not just about having this good match, because, okay, fine. AJ and Sami Zayn got this title match against Kofi. Where does that lead? It leads nowhere. Same thing. You blew off Kofi and Bryan when, by all accounts, because Bryan's back and we got some time before the pay-per-view, you easily could have just done that rematch at Money in the Bank and held off the Owens heel turn. Roman and Drew had a much better match than they did at WrestleMania. There's no disputing that. I thought that was a banger, quite frankly. I thought it was a real good match. But it's not going to lead. It was basically just a setup for Shane and Elias to attack Roman. So, all right, fine, it was a good match, but it didn't really lead anywhere. What do you like? Okay, I guess you're looking forward to Roman getting his revenge on Shane and Elias, but you could have just done that on SmackDown.
Yeah, it's inherently problematic because you can't do traditional wrestling booking with long-term feuds where you have several matches in the series when you have so many titles that you have to be in the title picture beyond the pay-per-view, and then the pay-per-view is filled with the same stuff over and over. So you want to see the traditional good booking, but then you also don't want to be bored seeing the same thing every month, and that's the only stuff getting on the show.
By the way, I absolutely, did you guys fall over? I was in tears at this. 1 week after we talk about again, formulaic booking, and we're like, oh, how are they going to get 8? And we're pretending to be the writers. What do we do with AJ and Seth this week? Is it do we put them on opposite tag teams? Do we have them do a contract signing? Do we have them wacky mixed partners that don't like each other? Guess what they do this week, the week after the contract? Another standard trope. They had them team together. When I saw that, I thought about our show last week, and I just absolutely fell out of my chair laughing at that one. And then something else we've talked about that I got to get this Robert Roode Ricochet situation. On this program 2 weeks ago, I went kind of off again. People who think we're too nice to WWE may want to tune into that. About the decision to have Robert Roode with no build whatsoever, except growing a mustache, or just shaving it to a mustache, beating Ricochet, handing Ricochet his first ever loss on TV, just with no build out of the blue. And the reason I had a problem with that, I think we were all in agreement, was none of us had any faith that Robert Roode was going to get any sort of sustained push, right?
Right.
Well, but we were all like, how long is it till they give up on this guy? 2 months, 6 weeks from now? Well, whomever had 2 weeks in the betting pool can feel free to collect $200 at Pass Go. Because, and does that not show that they don't listen to that they listen to podcasts? Yeah. By doing that match? Like the whole thing where they're like, as soon as that match was announced, what went through your head? Oh, Ricochet's getting his win back. Mm-hmm. And I had so many problems with this. So I had a problem with the original decision, but you did it. The logical move would be you build Robert Roode up a little bit longer. Ricochet's already in the Money in the Bank match. He's already still over, bless his soul. So you build Roode up kind of just on TV, have him win some matches. And then when Ricochet's done with Money in the Bank, probably not going to win it, you have Bobby Roode say, hey, you were in that match. I beat you. And you can build this. It can mean a little bit more in a few weeks. But no, instead, and I hated the way this match was laid out, they waited right before the match to explain why it was taking place. They provided the explanation after I have this in my, by the way, I have very comprehensive notes on this. They provided the explanation after Ricochet's entrance, then went to a commercial break, then did a Make-A-Wish video package. My hat's off to you. Then a horrid Natty and Naomi backstage segment. Then you had, during the match, after Cole finally gives the explanation that Roode politicked, quote unquote, to get the match because he had beaten Ricochet and thought it was fair that Ricochet would have to put his line. After that's established, which is very logical, mind you, you have the babyface announcer, Renee Young, making a case why the match shouldn't be taking place. Good God almighty.
I hope Vince McMahon wasn't in her ear telling her to say that, because Vince is completely senile at this point then. By the way, you got something else?
Yeah, hold on here. I've been told the
Oh,
it
thank
just popped
God.
up on my phone. That if you're not watching on Patreon, you have no idea what we're talking about. Justin was texting us that Kyle should recenter his camera because we couldn't see all of his face.
I was all over the place.
Kyle's getting heated, man.
I get so passionate. I got news for you,
I could practically see the Taco John's hot sauce coming out of your pores.
Oh my God. I have a confession to make on today's program.
Uh-oh.
I had an affair this afternoon.
Oh, you had Taco Bell, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, damn it. You got the joke right away. Oh, God, I love you, Justin Joyce, so much.
Hey, I like Taco Bell too. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, since I met Kyle Ross, I've been going to Taco John's a little bit more though.
Yeah. Oh boy, I'm just looking now. I got a lot more stuff to say. Oh boy. And I'm gonna go right with Ryan Drosty about, as he alluded to. I am voting to end this brand split, and I want to talk about the brand split here. Given the timeline of the first brand extension, or I want to talk about that. Pardon me. I want to give the timeline of the first brand extension when they did it. Okay, brand only pay-per-views in that year when the brand split was first established, 2002, right after WrestleMania 18. I believe it was Backlash 2007 when they decided to stop the brand only pay-per-views. It was going to be Raw and SmackDown guys on both pay-per-views. So they gave brand only pay-per-views a try for basically 4 years. Because remember, they didn't start those right away. It was Bad Blood 03 was the first time they did that. So for 4 years, they actually did brand only pay-per-views. This time around, they stopped doing them in about a year and a half. Okay. A few years after Backlash 07, and again, this is kind of my blind spot of WWE, that era. They eventually had guys from SmackDown showing up on Raw and vice versa. Well, now you're already doing that. So the pace has already been accelerated this time around. You're already heading towards the same situation that caused you to end it the first time, just faster. The writing is on the wall for this thing. And if Vince is like, oh, we just don't have enough stars on these shows, well, then your theory of the brand split, which is really just for the writers and those booking travel, is flawed, that it creates more stars, because it's not the case, nor has it really ever been the case. Again, let's go back to the first brand split. Everyone, I'll make an exception with Rey Mysterio Jr., but everyone else who became a champ in that era, 2002 to 2013, likely would have done so anyway, right? Until like the very end when they had like the Dolph Zigglers and Alberto Del Rios and Jack Swaggers, like until that period. But like 2002 through 2008, everyone who got a run with the world title, was going to get one anyway, don't you think? Like, I thought one of the bigger successes of that first brand split was the concurrent pushes of John Cena and Dave Bautista in 2004. But you're telling me they both wouldn't have gotten over anyway in a non-brand split environment? I think they would have.
Yeah. I think so. The only one I'm thinking about right off the bat, I mean, both tremendous performers, but you had Eddie and Benoit having the titles concurrently.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
They
at least one of them may have never made it to the top of the card.
Yeah, Eddie, maybe. You're right. Eddie, I mean, because like Lesnar was on, they needed to change that title real bad. And Eddie kind of was right guy, right time.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, who's to say he wouldn't have got it at some other time? It might not have been at that time. I mean, a lot of guys may have had to wait. Obviously, Cena and Batista couldn't win the title at the same time like they did at WrestleMania 21. But, and I think maybe Kofi, to use an analogy, is this brand splits Rey. He certainly was right place, right time. Maybe Becky and AJ benefited from this current brand split. But I just don't think, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I don't think the brand split, to Justin's earlier point, successfully creates more stars. It just doesn't.
No, I would agree. I'll get no disagreement from me. Justin, care to defend the brand split?
I don't think it's on the brand split. It's on the company. I mean, essentially, it's like theoretically, this should be no different than like AEW having debuted, when they did the brand split. You're getting two shows, two different sets of superstars. And like I said, super deep. I mean, if SmackDown all of a sudden popped up and was AEW with that roster, everybody would be going ape shit.
You know what? You're right. And again, I think it goes back to theory and practice is the problem. The problem is the theory. There is a theory for it. And to be honest with you, I was not a big fan of them going back to a brand split in 2016. But the one key, and you've hit on it now twice, they've got far more depth than they did 10, 12, 15 years ago. Far more depth. I mean, guys get injured all the time, and you don't want to say they're not missed, but like, I mean, how many people are just fighting to get on TV in this company? A lot. Which the issue is, I think, with the brand split is you have all the same people are like changing brands. You're not cycling guys out. It would work better if they're like, all right, for the next year, here are 4 top. We are going to get these 4 guys over on Raw. We're going to get these 4 guys over on SmackDown. And everyone else be damned. Now, if someone gets over by happenstance, like a Kofi, all right, we'll plug them in. But everyone else is going to put them over. But the problem is those guys who do the putting over stick around is another issue. And, I don't root for anyone to lose their job. And if I was a wrestler and I heard me say this, I'd be pretty pissed off. But, we always talk about what's the biggest problem facing WWE today. I think their biggest problem is they don't book their performers as if they have a shelf life, because they absolutely do.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was thinking about that the other day, is how, especially you see it in today's all major sports, especially top guys' careers are much longer than they used to be because of all the advances in medicine and taking care of their bodies and eating and travel. And wrestling for, the last decade has the same thing, where it used to be guys weren't around all that long because they broke down or they got into drugs or for whatever reason. So you had a faster cycle of guys and more guys coming in that were fresh. And you don't see, I mean, like it's shocking to me. Like Kevin Owens has already been in WWE for 5 years. Like that was people's runs for a long time.
Or they could go to another territory, or WCW or WWE and vice versa back in the day. And that would freshen them up, which maybe we'll have a situation that here.
Yeah, that's soon. The thing. They're like, well, let's just fucking call cut the mustard here. Okay. Does moving from Raw to SmackDown really freshen you up in the traditional sense? I mean, it's the same style of booking. Okay, maybe you get some fresh matchups, but AJ, for instance, had always been on SmackDown. I think it helped him moving to Raw, but it's way different than changing companies. Way different. So that's the thing. Oh, this guy's moving. Oh man, nothing you saw over the last year matters anymore because he's on SmackDown. Come on. The same people watched it. It's not like, we're going to talk about Gino Hernandez a little bit. When Gino Hernandez, back then you didn't have the TV. So when Gino Hernandez, if he did some jobs in Mid-South and then he shows up and you're a world-class viewer and he shows up on your TV, you don't know about those jobs he did in Mid-South. Here, you watched it. And, another argument for me personally, if I'm a writer against this brand split, if I prefer, and this goes to what Ryan was saying earlier about creativity, I prefer the 5-hour blank canvas per week that gives you more creative freedom, not to be pigeonholed with the same split crew where you have to book by numbers. You have to get your men's champion, your women's champion, your tag champs in. And it's just this very formulaic booking, whereas, and you can only, again, going back to what we've just been talking about, if you want to get somebody over, you have to do it at someone's expense, right? Well, there's only when you're splitting the crews, there's only so many people you can kind of like job out. And you have to be careful because you don't want to job somebody out too much, because what if you need them later in the year? So everyone's just kind of booked like a flat circle. I give a big thumbs down to the brand split.
I'm right there with you. I think you pretty much nailed it, Kyle Ross.
And Vince obviously doesn't want to. If he thinks it's stars, he just wants Roman Reigns on both shows. Then Roman Reigns should be the world champ. You could do, I think there should be 2 secondary champions and 1 world champion is what there should be in the men's roster. And 1 women's champion, 1 women's tag champion, 1 men's tag champion.
Oh, I just thought of somebody else who benefited from there being 2 titles.
Oh,
Recently, Goldberg.
Oh no!
Oh, what a performer! I don't know about that.
Coming back in Saudi Arabia, Bill Goldberg to the WWE.
I was a little disappointed in Bill for that, but will he be booed?
No, I doubt it. I don't think so.
Okay, I was referring to the obvious reason I thought there.
Oh yes, I didn't even think about that.
I don't know. I mean, am I wrong for that? I'm thinking that. Hey-o.
No, it makes sense. Should we move on to the Kyle Ross match of the week?
Yeah,
you have something in mind?
I'm firing up the network.
Okay,
I want to just go off on so many other things though. In WWE,
I want a 3-hour podcast.
I want to talk about how freaking Mojo Rawley should be sent to NXT UK if he thinks he's that big of a deal. I want to talk about cutting the house show schedule. My God, I don't give a damn about my chin just enjoying. I got tapes and I'm going to deliver them. God damn it!
Hey, I have no problem with them. I mean, like even if you end the brand split, you can have 2 touring rosters. Hell, they used to have 3 at one point. But I guess technically technically NXT they do.
But here's the thing: do you know that those 2 touring very rarely did both draw like real good money? Sometimes you had a hot, you had Hogan and you had a hot IC title program, but a lot of times there was a huge gap.
Yeah,
that's why they were called the A and B tours.
Yep.
So, all right, my match of the week.
Oh, wait, hold on. I got to do the lead in because I added background music last week. If you didn't hear it, great production by myself, if I do say so myself. But last week, Kyle Ross, the first edition of his match of the week, he recommended Terry Gordy versus David Von Erich from April 16th, 1983. I had a chance to watch that. Justin had a chance to watch that. Tremendous match.
Great fan interaction.
Yes, it was Terry Gordy, great selling in that match. Not like a fantastic like 5-star match or anything, but the crowd heat was awesome, and that was a great recommendation, Kyle. So for this week,
World Class is back in the news, and I was almost tempted to go because all the Gino Hernandez talk to go World Class again, but I'm not going to do that. That would be
don't recommend Flair and Kerry Von Erich.
Oh, don't start with that.
All right, Kyle. So this week, week number 2, it is the Kyle Ross I Love This Sport match of the week. Take it away, Kyle.
And let's not forget our unofficial 2 weeks ago. I guess we did Dustin Rhodes and Vader Clash 29.
Oh, yeah, excellent. Highly recommend that one, everybody.
Okay, so I've done WCW and I've done World Class. Let's go WWE. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? It's funny that Justin referenced that Flair Kerry match, and he and I had a very lengthy discussion about it. Okay. Look, man, you started watching Game of Thrones in season 7. What do you want from me? Okay.
That's a great analogy.
Okay. So, but we were talking, and again, this podcast, we're getting a little long in the tooth here. Maybe like your weekly edition of Raw. But we talked about, how wrestling is viewed these days and how it can be evaluated. I've long been of the opinion evaluation process is broken. And God, I wish I could bring that thread up real quick so I could talk about some of the points we were making. But we talked about how if, a match, when you watch what is purported to be a classic match, like Flair and Kerry in the cage, Christmas night 82, the most important match in world class history. And if you just watch it in a vacuum with no frame of reference, you're not going to get the desired outcome as a viewer. What you could, had you watched it real time or had you watched the TV building up to it, whatever. Okay. But I had thrown a match back to Justin about just the opposite of that, where sometimes you can go back and watch a match that in real time you didn't care as much about, but if you watch it in a vacuum, you're like, is this really good? And that's the match we're going to go with this week. Matt Hardy versus Edge, Steel Cage, Unforgiven 05. So you guys remember this feud? Obviously, it was a big deal at the time. I mean, if Top Rope Nation existed in 2005, my God, how much time would we have spent on this story? You know, Matt had just come back about 2 months earlier after he'd been fired, the well-publicized firing in the wake of Edge and Lita having their affair. Matt came back and they had this ready-made storyline, and good God, did they fuck it up right off the bat.
He got squashed at, was it SummerSlam?
Yes, they squashed Matt Hardy like a goddamn grape.
Matt Hardy was so hot at that point too, like hottest free agent in wrestling.
I remember watching that and being like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And they had already kind of actually hurt that, to be honest with you, by, you know, having Vince just introduce him and stuff. They had taken the edge off the Matt Hardy character. No pun intended. But I had heard, you know, I'd seen some people, I'd go in forums and, read people on Twitter and whatnot. It was actually, do you know who it was? Who I read on Twitter who got me to watch this match? Alan Cheapshot. A.K.A. Alan Blackstock, who's been in the news, obviously, with that Vince McMahon thread that everyone picked up on. He had put over this Matt Hardy Edge match. And I remember I watched it in real time, and I was like, that was really good. I'm like, I remember watching it. I didn't give a shit. I remember that whole pay-per-view I didn't give a shit about. Unforgiven 05. Shawn Michaels, I think, were Chris Masters on that show, for time of reference. That was after Shawn Michaels declared pro wrestling fake on an edition of Raw after losing to Hulk Hogan.
Yes.
But anyway, so I throw Matt Hardy. I'm like, okay. I knew it was a month after they squashed Hardy like a bug at SummerSlam. I'm like, and I watch it. My God. This video package beforehand would have made you think that this was the hottest program in the promotion in years. Again, you don't have and this speaks to WWE TV, even struggling back then, you didn't have kind of it didn't wear on you to the point where you're like, I don't really care about this anymore. You're watching it just in a vacuum. And folks, this match, the heat, the violence, the intensity is just tremendous. This is one of the most underrated matches of that last decade in WWE. Matt Hardy versus Edge, Steel Cage, Unforgiven 05.
I thought you were going to quote the Kurt Angle, the 3 eyes there for a second from back in the day.
He was on that.
Integrity.
Yeah, that was when John Cena was starting to, the crowd was starting to turn on him too. That period. John, yep. I think Kurt worked John in the title match on that show. That was a Raw only pay-per-view, by the way. But okay. I mean, seriously, as much as they screwed that program up, if you watch this match in a vacuum, you'll be like, oh my God, this was really good stuff.
I will watch it because I don't really have any memory of this match. I'm sure I watched it at the time. But if you watch it, listeners, and you got thoughts, hit us up, topropenation@gmail.com, or you can tweet us your reactions at topropenation, and we can talk about them next week. So that's the Kyle Ross. I love this sport match of the week. Guys, let's wrap it up with the 5th edition of Dark Side of the Ring, the Viceland documentary, which premiered last night on Gino Hernandez, the Texas wrestling star from World Class Championship Wrestling. A lot of world class talk on this broadcast the last few weeks. And I have to say, after viewing all 5 of them now, and we railed on the Montreal one a few weeks ago, that one was terrible. But the other 4 are all pretty good. I thought the Savage one was, the Savage one wasn't bad. It was average to slightly above average.
I don't think it needed to be made. Except for the fact that Randy Savage is a big star, and maybe they were just using that as a way to hook people in.
I mean, I'm a huge Randy Savage fan, so I was looking forward to it. But like you said at the time, Kyle, there wasn't a whole lot of new information in it. But it was an okay watch. But man, the Brody one, the Von Erichs one, and this one on Gino, all 3 are really, really good. And I left after watching the Gino Hernandez one last night. This is easily my favorite now. And that changed after 1 week, because last week we talked glowingly about the Von Erichs one, and that was my favorite one I had seen. Now this is my number 1 of the series. Next week they have one on the Fabulous Moolah, and I think that's the last one contracted to air, but I think they've actually made a few more that will hopefully see the light of day. But Personally, I knew of Gino Hernandez. I knew of his death. I hadn't seen a lot of his work. I was vaguely familiar with him. Learned a lot more about him watching the documentary, and it's a really emotional documentary because of the fact that you got his mother on there, who hasn't done really any media over the years. You've got his daughter on there, his ex-wife. Really, just it's almost like a crime mystery as you're watching it, because there's two theories on Gino's death: that he overdosed, number one, or number two, he was with the wrong crowd and he was murdered. And they kind of explore both sides. And I think the thing that for me put this one over the top is that they present new information with his death, and they get someone on record who kind of ran with the drug crowd in the 80s there in Dallas, that they disguise his voice.
What a group that would have been to hang out with. Huh?
Yeah, they disguise his voice, but
the Dallas drug crowd of the 1980s. If that doesn't get the
lot of cocaine
flowing, yeah, I don't know what.
A lot of cocaine, but they get him on. This guy, he talks about the night Gino died, and then they film Gino's mother as she listens to the interview, as you're hearing it too, watching it with headphones on. And this is a woman who, for years, I don't know how much spoilers we want to get into on this, but for years she had thought she was very certain that her son was murdered. And so this is the moment where she's going to get some clarity finally, after 32 years, I guess, when they filmed this. Was her son murdered? Did he overdose? And this guy claims to know for sure. And so they play his comments, and you watch the mother, take it all in. It's really powerful. So, and to me, I was back and forth on if this one or the Von Erichs one was the best one of the series. And then after that kind of final segment, that puts this one over the top for me. Kyle, your thoughts?
Yeah, this was the best one of the five. And what was, I think, noteworthy about that is, we talked about this last week. The Brody and the Von Erich stories transcend wrestling. Those stories are something that can grab a quote unquote non-wrestling fan to watch, right? Brody's murder, it speaks to it's kind of like that mob mentality of wrestling. It's just I think if you don't really know, it's just insane that it happened. People know who did it, and the person was just never convicted and walked scot-free. I think that's the Von Erichs. I think it was you, Ryan, who said it. Other than the Kennedys, name a family in the United States of America that's experienced that much tragedy. That again transcends wrestling. It's not just a wrestling story. They were wrestlers, but it goes beyond wrestling. You don't need to be a wrestling fan to feel empathetic watching that story. Gino Hernandez going in, I was interested because I was like, and there was a debate about this too. Bruce Mitchell was going off, just how novel a story Gino's was. I think an argument can be made that it's one of many cautionary tales in wrestling. I don't know if it's any different than, say, an Art Barr, his story, right? Mm-hmm. Art also died of an overdose. But what made this documentary the best is that it was the best one as a documentary. Obviously, I love pro wrestling. And there's so many great stories to be told. Or I shouldn't say great. I should say unique stories to be told. And they're always, generally speaking, told so poorly to the public. And it just frustrates me. Like that Fighting with My Family movie. I thought that movie was
wrestling does the real life stories do appeal to people that aren't wrestling fans. I can use my wife, for example. She'll never watch a wrestling show with me, but she'll watch the documentaries about wrestling with me because they really engross you. It's such an interesting business, and it draws people in. Yeah,
but I think for the most part, they're not told well.
I agree. But when told well, they have a lot of crossover potential.
Whether it's the Carney talk or if it's just I saw some people using the phrase, too many people were trying to bootlick Meltzer on the first four. Where it's just, again, but I talked about it too. It was just, my problem particularly with the first two, the Savage and the Montreal one, where you had a bunch of talking heads that just, it seemed more about the talking heads and the stories themselves and the talking heads' desire to either be the one to confirm or deny popular urban legends among those stories. This documentary had a clear focus, which all good documentaries do, whether it's wrestling or not. And, it didn't waste a ton of time, talking about Gino. I thought it established Gino as a successful wrestler, kind of what his character was and the duality of, his character and his real life. I think it did a great job there, but it was very clear and the timeline was done well. Like sometimes you watch the other ones, and for me, it was fine because I know the real timeline, but like I always felt with the other four, it could be confusing. And this was not confusing in any way. This was a very, very well done documentary. And I would really recommend everyone to watch. Gino Hernandez was fantastic, by the way. It made me really want to watch a lot of Gino Hernandez, with World Class, like so many promotions. They have the one big angle and they struggle to move on from it. And in their case, it was Von Erich's Freebirds, obviously. The only feud really post Von Erich's Freebirds that worked and drew money for them was Kevin and Kerry against the dynamic duo, Gino and Chris Adams. And, the one match they did show footage from, or they showed footage from a few, but the one they highlighted was the Cotton Bowl match where it was hair versus hair. And man, again, you're not going to be, if you watch that after listening to us talk about it, you're not going to be blown away maybe by the wrestling, especially with 2019 eyes. But the key to that is, spoiler alert, after Gino and Chris lose, the documentary, their reaction to not wanting to get their head shaved is so fucking great. Like how they're running away and like the fans are tackling them and throwing them in the ring. It's just so good. I love the Gino Hernandez, Chris Adams tag team with all my heart and soul. And there's about a half dozen matches they have with Kerry and Kevin in the back half of 85 they're all pretty fun watches. But the Cotton Bowl one is the most memorable for sure.
I will agree that this documentary got me ready to watch more of the WWE Network, and I think I'm going to be watching a lot of World Class just to check out the Gino Hernandez stuff in the coming weeks. And Justin Joint, I know you've been watching this documentary and you're about halfway through. I think you'll be watching a lot of World Class too after you finish this one. Yeah,
absolutely. I've been able to watch the first 15 minutes and it's really good so far.
Yeah. So highly recommended. Definitely highly recommended. Check it out. And I hope the series continues, Kyle.
Okay. And there was something that was gone into, and whoever directed or the producer actually replied and read it. So there's a story out there. Obviously this focused on the circumstances of Gino's death, but there's another controversy in Gino's life as to whom his father is. Whether or not it was Paul Bosch was his actual father. Him and Paul were very close, obviously. Gino got his start in the Houston territory. And the producer said, we just didn't have time to go into it, but we're aware of it. And we may release some stuff on that later. So that's another thing. And you know what? Like I said, this documentary had focus. I think it was actually for the better that they didn't, because had they incorporated that, and that's too much for an hour. If you're trying to focus on two controversies, you're going to be jumping all over the damn place, and it's going to be an uneven documentary. So I understand actually why they cut that out.
Yeah. I think Viceland that channel is really going all in on wrestling, because they got the Dark Side of the Ring. And then I think in 2 weeks, right after the Mulo Dark Side of the Ring airs, the next week they have a new series starting called The Wrestlers.
Yes. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, it focuses in on like some of the bigger independent stars in wrestling. It's kind of like a behind the scenes series, documentary style, and that looks interesting. So I've thought about reaching out to the guys responsible for that show, or even Dark Side of the Ring, and trying to get them on the Top Rope Nation here. So we'll see what we can do. But that would be an interesting talk.
Very interesting that when we talk about the Viceland docs, which ones we thought really succeeded and which ones, maybe obviously we all, I think, agree the Montreal one stunk, and maybe the Savage one, in my opinion, at least fell short. It was the three kind of non-mainstream stories, for lack of a better term, I guess. The three everyone knows Randy Savage. Everyone knows Montreal. A lot of people obviously know the Von Erichs. A lot of people know Bruiser Brody. Probably less know Gino Hernandez. And, one person who didn't know much about him, apparently Ryan Satin, caught a lot of shit. And I thought Dave Meltzer's comments were grossly unfair towards Ryan Satin. Ryan Satin is like Adam Schefter. He... and I'm not like the president of Ryan Satin fan club by any means, but like he reports breaking news. He doesn't put it in historical
Yeah,
context.
he's not a historian.
He's not, and he's never claimed to be.
Yeah.
So that's Dave's job. And, Bruce Mitchell jumped on him too, sat. And Bruce, I mean, he doesn't bring any news. He's just a historian. So, like, that's not, like when Adam Schefter, reveals like a big free agent signing, he never is asked or expected to put it in like some proper historical context or like, be able to rattle off 5 similar free agent signings in the history of the NFL. So I have no problem with that. And I mean, Ryan Satin's a younger guy.
Yeah, he's younger than all of us. And I said I was vaguely familiar with Gino Hernandez, not real familiar with him. And Satin's a couple years younger than I am. And so I wouldn't expect him to know.
He was not a star on the national level. He never made it to be. I mean, outside of, he was still kind of in his prime. I mean, they were going to do a really big angle with Chris Adams. They kind of touched on the documentary. And by the way, you want to see bad promotional tactics. Watch the World Class where they announce Gino's death and they talk about 2 tragedies. Gino's death and Chris Adams being blinded.
Oh, have never seen that.
Yeah, World Class. There's a few things, maybe, it's funny, Justin and I were joking. There's a few things that you need to know about World Class. In addition, very heated crowds. But the Von Erichs didn't lose a lot. Number 2, they didn't do clean jobs. And through boy, were they the king of disgusting promotional tactics at times.
Well, I think watching the documentary, though, it's pretty clear how talented he was. Yes. And when you got to the 90s and the WWF, WCW wars, it's unquestionable he would have been a star. He would have been on the national stage for sure.
I mean, the easiest comp of Gino Hernandez, if you're not familiar with this, is Tully Blanchard. Obviously, those two got their start together. They were the original dynamic duo. If you like Tully Blanchard, you're going to like Gino Hernandez a lot.
Yeah.
It's a very similar character.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good stopping point, guys. It's we went a little longer than anticipated, but hey, it's always fun. Always fun chatting with you all.
I like how we've got things up to closer to 90 minutes now.
Kyle prefers the longer podcast. I always try to get it to around an hour because I want to, attract new listeners. And I feel like, is he a 90-minute podcast? It's too long. But you know what? This is damn good content. Mm-hmm. And so if you tune in, you're going to be hooked. So
it's not like we're going 3 hours.
No. So I say this a lot, but hey, if you like what we're doing this because we want to keep the show growing. And one of the ways to keep the show growing, the best way is for you that listen to the show to recommend it to one of your friends because they'll take you at your word. They'll give us a listen. We think that they will like what they hear. So if you like us, recommend us and leave us a rating. That's the best thing you can do to help us out. Secondly, check out our Patreon page. Mentioned that earlier, patreon.com/topropenation. And we will be back next week. We're closing in on episode 100. So next week will be episode 98. So by the end of the month, guys, we're going to be hitting episode 100. Big century mark. So looking forward to that as well. Any big plans this weekend, fellas?
I'm distracted. Lita, Unforgiven 2005.
He's already watching it.
Oh man, she's looking pretty fantastic.
Kyle,
big plans this weekend?
Not really, to be honest with you. Not a ton. Taking it easy this weekend. Gonna finish up the backyard, which I'm sure is thrilling content for anyone listening, and then me and the missus are gonna do something for Mother's Day.
Yes, indeed. All of us will be treating our wives on Sunday. So, and then
she wants to go to a brewery tour. We have like this brewery pass thing, this Cleveland thing where you get like stamps if you go to all these different breweries, and she's like a few behind her friends, so she wants to catch up. I'm like, fine with me.
That sounds great.
Yeah,
love it.
Better than watching some shitty rom-com or something like that.
Well, you can wrap up Mother's Day with the second to last episode of Game of Thrones. I know I'll be tuning in.
I'll tell you, I'm going to wrap up Mother's Day, pal.
Oh my goodness. We have to put a parental advisory on this broadcast now. In the closing moments, Kyle Ross takes us over the edge.
I was talking about the second to last episode of Game of Thrones. I don't know what you're talking about. Get your mind out of the gutter,
man. On that note, hit us up on Twitter at Top Rope Nation. We're on Instagram, Facebook as well. And we'll catch you guys next week, episode 98. Top Rope Nation. Have a good weekend.